I think knowing your why of who you and what you are, what's the reason you get up in the morning? Because, well, at the time that the ungodly hours that we wake up, 99% of the people don't.
Right.
But there's got to be a why, right? What is it that moves you? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I can tell you that my why is for helping the athletes that I train.
Athletes, entrepreneurs, and those who've embraced the necessary change for the better. They've endured, discovered, rebuilt. But what about you? Are you waiting for life? Or is life waiting for you? This is the Come Up.
What's up, guys? Octavio here with the Come Up, and special announcement. We are now fully sponsored by Recovery Through Repetition. So super grateful for that. But today we have a really interesting podcast. I think I have a good friend of mine, big old Richard Woodroof. Now we go back a while, my man.
A long time, man.
8 years.
Wow.
8 years, dude.
Dude, we're getting old. Well, at least
we sounds like a lot of people, but dude, we're getting up there, man.
Yeah.
And it's fun because we've taken two different forks in the road, and we always end up meeting in the same spot.
Right.
So it's insane how it's evolved. Our relationship has evolved. You're now living in my neighborhood now too. Yep. So it's cool, man. It's cool. It's cool to see where two different paths have gone, right?
That's the way life is, though. It's amazing how often things like that, they venture off and then they always lead back together.
Yeah.
So it's just a metaphor for life.
I agree. It ups and downs, side, but we're always in the same path,
yep.
Right? And our paths have intertwined a lot in the last couple of years, business-wise, teaching-wise, the whole thing, right?
Right.
And that's what we want to do. So let's get into a little bit of who you are. Let's talk about Raw. Right?
Okay.
And, just tell the listeners a little bit of background, and I'll poke your brain during the whole journey. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right, let's go.
Sounds good. So I worked as a professional tennis coach for almost 20 years. I worked with some top juniors in the country. I worked with some college players. I worked with some players on tour, both tours, men's and women's. And then about 10 years ago, I switched over to the fitness side of it. And that was something that was fairly new, to be that detailed with it. And I've really enjoyed it ever since then. I feel like I was a good coach back then, but I feel like now I have something to say. I have something to offer a little bit more. And that's been one of the best parts of this journey to me, is finding that voice and then sharing my voice. I do a lot of speaking at coaches conventions, things like that. My blogs, my social media is full of it. I know I get a lot of questions from people from that who want to know more about the training that we do. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting to me personally to be able to share that with people.
But let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you basically saw something that was missing in a sport that's dominated for a while in tennis, and you saw a need for something that no one else was doing, right?
Right.
And you ventured into the unknown on how you were going to make a living from it, right? Because you knew tennis. You know tennis.
Right.
But you also were fit, right? You were an athlete. You're an athlete still.
It was always something that was there for me. It was always something, working out has always been something that I enjoy. I've gone through a lot of different phases. 25 years ago, I ran a marathon because I wanted to do it. It was a bucket list item for me. So I spent 6 months training for it. That was the LA Marathon, 1995. And since then, I probably could count on one hand the number of times I've run more than 5 miles at a time. So your training changes,
right?
But you're always doing something.
Right.
You're always working
evolving.
out. So it's always been a part of it. So years ago, I sat down with a couple of coaches that I worked with, and this would have been in August after our players had been to nationals, so that all the national tournaments over the summer. And we were game planning. We were talking about what we needed to do for the next year. And we all agreed that our players needed to be stronger and faster. Now, this would have been at a time where like I said, like my job really didn't even exist at that point. So I started putting together some very rudimentary workout programs for our players. And we were doing that in addition to the stuff that we were doing on court with them. So it was just adding a half an hour, maybe 3 times a week to their training. And we found that players fell into a couple of different categories. There were a couple of them who were just going to come in and do the extra work because we said, you need to do this. There were a couple of them that wanted to wait back and see, but then they saw the results both on the court that their peers were getting. It's like, hey, I don't want to get left behind.
Right.
And so at that time, I was being helped by my wife at the time, who was a former All-American tennis player and also a personal trainer. And we were, like I said, the program that we were doing was very rudimentary. Just basic stuff, just trying to get a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. But back at that time, the science wasn't really published, and especially for tennis-specific training. And so I started to realize that if we wanted this to do what we wanted it to do, I needed to get a little bit more involved. So I went out and got a couple of certifications in speed, agility, quickness, that type of training. And the program kind of increased from there, and it just started to become more and more a part. And this was about the time, too, you started to see more and more players on the pro tour who had a fitness coach, a full-time fitness coach. A lot of them traveled with them, or they would come spend, a couple of weeks of a training block with them. Certainly in December, in the quote-unquote off-season, they would spend time with their fitness coach.
Let's talk about an off-season for a tennis player, a pro tennis player, right?
There isn't one.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about that, right? Because historically, tennis, 20 years ago, athletes did not pass the 33-34 max, right?
Right.
Great. It
right.
It was their time. It's over. Right?
And also players tended to come out on tour and make a splash at a younger age. You would see, even on the men's tour, there were a handful of guys that would win majors when they were in their teens. Michael Chang, Pete Sampras, guys like that. And then your peak time was in the mid-20s. And then as you got on the pushing 30, it was
getting harder and harder.
It was getting harder and harder. But now guys are coming out on tour a little bit later. They're maturing a little bit later. But what they're really doing is they're really taking the time and taking care of their bodies. And they're realizing how important the fitness component is to their career. Their body is what they use to make money. That's their tool. And so they're taking better care of it, and they're understanding that especially as you get older, as you get to be 28, 29, 33, 34, you can still play. You don't need as much time on court as you did when you were 18. You know how to hit the ball. Roger Federer knows how to hit the ball. He needs to take care of his body and really manage his schedule. And that's the other thing that players are doing. They're taking blocks of time and recovering.
They're not in every tournament.
They're not in every tournament.
They're picking and choosing where they want to go.
Exactly.
Giving themselves a little bit more time to recover between tournaments.
Exactly.
So you're seeing that, but you're seeing that great. So you're seeing Roger Federer still dominating games.
Sure.
At 38.
Right.
He's still right.
But you see too that the science of it. Hey, I want to peak at these specific events.
Right. Oh,
what do I do? Okay,
right.
I need to take this training block. I need to just play this handful of tournaments to get ready. And then I can peak, and then I can take time off again. And that's what's extending these guys' career.
Which is amazing because
it is amazing.
Right? You're seeing tennis, the greats actually lasting longer.
Right.
So these records are getting blasted.
How lucky are we that we're still getting Federer, Nadal? These guys are still
going
winning.
at it, man.
Right.
So it's insane because I grew up watching Agassi.
Wow, you are old.
Yeah. Well,
Oh wait, I grew up watching Borg and McEnroe. So
McEnroe, so I don't want to
I'm
hear
really
it. They were
old.
still using wood rackets in your time.
I used wood brackets. I admit till I was 14.
But yeah, man, and that's what I wanted to talk about. It's like the evolution of training systems, right? Strength systems,
Right.
speed systems in sports today, right? So I thought you were a perfect candidate to come on and say the come up of this specific thing in tennis,
Right.
right? So now you've developed this system for over what, 10 years?
10 years.
And now you're all over the country.
Really more than that. 10
Yeah.
years full time doing it.
So let's talk about that jump off, right? So you're a coach and then you decide, there's something here, right? So here comes the entrepreneurial side of you, right? Which is another big thing, right? And the
Right.
fear of shit.
Well, so when I started with one client, and she came 3 times a week, and I would spend a lot of the rest of the days that I trained her making contacts, writing a newsletter, reaching out to coaches, and all of that type of thing. In the mornings, I was up in Jupiter, and I was helping a friend of mine at a club. So I was teaching a little tennis, helping him with his ladies
that
teams.
safety net.
That safety net, exactly. And then you start to get a little more busy and a little more busy. And at some point, I remember hearing a comedian talking about it. And most comedians, they start off and they have an office job or whatever, and then they're out
Moonlighting.
Right, they're out moonlighting. They're trying to get 5 minutes on stage anywhere they can, honing their craft. And at some point, this comedian was talking about if you're going to make it, you got to cut the safety net because you're half in and you're half out.
You're not dedicating
Exactly.
all your effort into your success.
And you can't. And if you're only doing it halfway, that's
Half
what you're going to
results.
get out of it. Exactly.
Facts. I agree.
And so fortunately for me, at some point, I was able to say, you know what? It's time to cut the safety net. This is what I need. I have players now that are wanting times in the morning. I can't fill all the time in the
Not driving
afternoon.
up.
Right. So I finally made that cut and started on this full time.
So talk to me about talking to people, parents, coaches, trying to explain something that's never been done. Right? So
Right.
how do you sell a service that hasn't been sold and isn't proven? But the good thing is you have proved it. So
Now I have.
Now you have, but-
Now there's a little bit of history, a little bit of results
right,
in
but
there.
in the beginning, let's talk about the beginning because it's got to be discouraging. Like, oh, dude, we don't do fitness. We
Right.
do swing. We
Right.
have court time.
Right. And so for me growing up and you know, in my generation, our fitness consisted of you picked up the balls at the end of practice and you ran a couple of suicides on the lines for 5 minutes and then you went home and that was it. You know. But one of the big things for me, one of the big selling points for me was that I played the game and I coached the game at a high level for a long time. So I know the game. And I can talk to the coach because I work very closely with the coaches of the players that I train. And I can talk to the coach and say, what issue are you having? Well, you know, she's having a hard time opening her stance on a deep ball to her backhand. Boom, I know exactly what that means.
Right.
So I can design a drill specific to that.
Right.
And the other thing for me was it was important because I did have that coach's background. It was important to me that I let them know that I'm done with that part of the coaching. I'm strictly on this side now. And that was another reason it was important for me to cut that net, to let people know, look, I'm not coming in here trying to
change your
it,
swing.
right,
I'm not trying to take
take your players away. I got one specific thing that I'm going to help you with.
And I'm going to make you look good.
And I'm going to make you look good. Exactly.
Right.
So that was a big part of it. And that coincided with the time that you started seeing more and more players spending time with their fitness trainer, with their fitness coach.
Right.
So that was a big part of it for me.
Okay. So now, here's the jump, right? So we actually meet in 2006? No.
2011, 12?
Yeah. And you're coming in, because I had just come in to
Right.
Back Sports Performance.
Right.
And they didn't take outside guys.
Right.
So you and me were the only two guys that came in. Like, oh, well, Rich is the tennis pro, right? He's the tennis fitness guy, and you have your the training. I was like, cool. So you went private.
Right.
And you have all the success. You have your book. You have all that. And then an opportunity talks, right? So let's talk about that, because there's always opportunities that people actually, some people just travel like this.
Right.
And that's their thing. But you've always been open-minded to anything, right?
I've always been the type to say, hey, I'll listen to anybody about anything.
That's right.
You know,
You've always
you want to talk, I'll talk, and then we'll go from there and we'll see what happens.
Right. So then you come in and you get a proposal, let's say that, and then you become the director of Impact Sports.
Right.
My question, right? So you went private, right? You had your own thing, you keep raw, and then you take a position in corporate America.
Right, exactly.
So what did that feel like? I mean, because there's a lot of people that want out of corporate America, want to do their private.
Right.
Then you went the opposite way. Maybe was it to chill? I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen, right?
Right. There's all sorts of things that can happen.
And at that time, it was the play. I don't know,
Well, and at that time, one of the things that it was allowing me to do was it was allowing me to be a little bit selective about my clients, which is a good feeling.
Cool.
Right. It is. It's a nice thing. Unfortunately, the other side of it is it doesn't allow you to give everything that you need that you can.
Your passion and want.
Exactly. You know what it is? It's to your why. It's to your why.
And we'll get into that because that's huge.
It is huge.
I love talking about
it. It is huge. And so, I spent 4 years, the better part of 4 years, doing that. And then, kind of starting to realize that this is not my why. This isn't why this is not why I get up in the morning.
This is not filling me
especially
anymore.
at 4:30, the times that we get up. So.
We do wake up early. But, we're always the first and the last. It's always been our thing.
Yep.
So you go to corporate, then you're seeing, your why. And we'll get into that in a minute. But you get the why and you're like, man, I got the itch. I want it back. Right.
Right. And I wanted to be able to do more. I wanted to be able to travel more, to work with the higher level players that I work with, because they need that. That's a big thing. And like I said, 20 years ago, job didn't exist. Now you see it all around.
Everybody has a
right, and everybody talks about it. And everyone, all the players, all the coaches know how important it is. The agents too. So
agents, but now academies have a strength and conditioning program.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So, and if they don't, they're getting skipped over.
They're not getting anyone.
Right. So academies have their own strength coaches. The big guys have their own coaches that follow them around everywhere. And now you're back. You're back into your element. And I'll tell you why, because you've been here. We've been working together again for the better part of 2 now, because I came back.
Yep.
And now I saw what corporate did to you. And now you're back. You're that smiley, happy, I love this shit. I'm always here. You're always smiling. Because we always joked around, right?
Right.
And then when have certain agendas or whatever, you're just like this, you're cranky. And now you're back to being you.
Well, you're pulled in so many different directions. At all times.
And you're babysitting and
you're babysitting, you're putting out fires. And those fires, they never come up at a convenient time. Right?
When is a convenient fire?
Well, right. Well, when I got nothing else going on. How about that?
Yeah, okay. All right. So then you're back to really dedicating, and let's measure what's happened in the last 2 years for you, man. Because professionally, you blew up. Right? You're one of those guys that, you've had great things happen to you.
I've been very fortunate over the last couple of years. Very fortunate.
Very. So let's talk, your book of business is insane. Right, you have some huge players.
Some nice names on there, yes.
How modest of you, right? So, but then you always have people, all big players that are coming around. You're always one of those staples in this community. Like, hey man, just go talk to Rich or whatever. People go to you,
and that's the referrals, and that's what every business needs. Every business needs referrals,
right?
And it is nice that when they come from that type of person. and also when they go to that type of person. And tennis is one of those things, whether it's a coach or a fitness coach, where it's almost like you need players to get players, because players want to go where the other players are.
Better players.
Right, exactly. It's like,
I want to train with that coach
because so-and-so trains there. And that is a big deal. I actually feel like, to some extent, whether it's from a fitness standpoint or just a tennis standpoint, that the best coaches need to be working with the younger players, because that's where
future crop is.
Right, exactly. That's where it is. But those are the ones that need that good eye for detail. The ones who get that repetition and say, no, we're going to take our time. We're going to do it right.
And we won't go to the next one.
We won't go to the next one. So, I see people and they come in and they've got their 9, 10, 11-year-old child, and they want all the fancy bells and whistles, and they've seen all this cool stuff on Instagram. Not on my Instagram, but they've seen this cool stuff, and they say, you do parachutes? No, I'm not hooking your 9-year-old up to a parachute. He can't do a squat without his knees going into deep valgus. Exactly. So, no, I'm not going to do that just because it looks good and just because I do it with other players.
Right.
It's not appropriate for them.
You got to crawl before you run.
Not everything is done for the gram.
Hashtag. Right? But
that doesn't mean that I don't do some things for the gram.
So we do shameless plugs and all that. But, hey, reality is that we all got to start somewhere, right? And then I know you do have a young base, and I want to know how young is too young, because I've seen you turn like, hey, this is too young. She's not a prodigy.
Right.
He's not a prodigy.
It's not even about whether or not you're a prodigy, because at 9, you don't know. You don't know. But you know what? The thing is, one of the things that gets me the most, and I think it's one of the most misused, misunderstood terms in our business, is sport-specific training. Okay, so even with the pro players that I work with, 90%, 85% of what we do would not be considered sport specific. Okay, it's just training. It's just training. Okay, so I still have, a couple of non-tennis clients. We do the same types of stuff:
push, pull,
hinge,
stability,
lunge. Stability. What else you got? Vertical, horizontal. There you go.
That's it.
Done.
That's a secret design.
So for example, tennis players are on court and they internally rotate all day long. So they don't need to come in the gym and internally rotate. In other words, they don't need to come in here and throw medicine balls all day long against the wall, mimicking the stroke that they've done for 4 hours on court that day. They need to come in and go the other way. They need to get open back up. They need to externally rotate. Right. So to me, having, for example, like a 3-to-1 posterior-anterior ratio for upper body work, that to me is sport specific, because an offensive lineman doesn't necessarily need that, but a tennis player does.
Absolutely.
So it's not necessarily the exercises, the drills that we do that are sport specific. It's the ratios, it's the programming. And that to me is what's really important. That's what separates it. Now, yes, we do spend a lot of time working on lateral movement. We work on crossover steps a lot. We work on being able to open the hip and accelerate for 2 steps and then change direction, because that is tennis specific. But that's also specific to a lot of other positions in sports, basketball, football, baseball, exactly. So the drills might be the same or very similar. Yes, we do work on some totally tennis specific movement patterns, but that's a very small part of what we do. And especially with the younger athletes, the under 12, they need the ABCs: agility, balance, coordination. That's it. That's what they need to get done. And you're right. I've had players come in, parents come in with 9-year-olds, and I'm like, they don't need me. They need to go out and play in the yard. Just take them to the park. Let them run around.
Yeah,
let them be a kid. Because that's what prevents burnout too. And burnout can happen at 12, 13, 14, just like it can happen at 25 or 26. So I have a young player who's 15, extremely talented, and can do a lot of things.
Small.
Is that
You can say it, man. You can say who she is. They'll love it.
Coco Gauff?
Yes, the Coco.
Yes.
All right.
So, but she is capable physically of doing a lot of things, but I hold her back from it more than most. But I hold her back from it because I have a long-term developmental plan with her, just like I do with every other player that I work with, regardless of their age, regardless of their ability level. We have a long-term plan in place. You know, and one of the other things, and we were talking earlier about schedule and playing, you know, being particular with which tournaments you play.
Recovery.
I tell players all the time, and this is junior players, pro players, and everyone in between. You don't have to play anything. I get this all the time. Oh, this 15-year-old they've got a national tournament coming. Oh, he's got to be ready for that. No, he doesn't. He doesn't need to play. He doesn't have to play it. There's plenty of time. There's points everywhere. There's going to be, guess what? There's going to be another one next month. There's going to be another one next year.
There's points everywhere.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's a big thing that I believe a lot of parents, one, I totally understand about, hey, I want him to try to earn a scholarship.
Right.
Right? But to be thinking pro at the age of 9?
It's insane. It's just crazy. And really it's setting you up for failure. It really is.
Dude, get your basic building blocks, your ABCs.
Right.
Let's continue to develop as an athlete.
Right.
Let's see where you are. Because if you're there at 13, 14, right, or 15, we could see something, right? And if somebody sees that, like there's exceptions to the game, like Coco, right? There's exceptions, of course, right? But then there's other people that can develop.
Sure.
And they can still get an education. And they can still get it. But don't, it kills me, especially around this time a lot. There's a lot of, hey, my kid has it. How do you know he has it when, let's say you were a player, okay?
Right.
I get it. You see he's got talent, but how do you know he's going to last? He's got to love the game.
A long time.
Dude, a long time.
Love the game.
Dude.
Gotta love the game.
And if you force it, it's just like, dude, I'm probably going to be guilty as hell, right? Because the kid's going to be doing ladder drills.
I'm not going to be training your kid when you're 4.
Dude, you got to.
Or we might do it, but we're not going to do tennis specific stuff.
He's going to be ABC, man. But reality is, there's a lot of expectations put on young children that shouldn't be.
Too much expectation.
Just
Too much expectation. Just have fun.
Man.
Let it go. And you know, when it comes to their trainings, when it comes to what I do with them, train the athlete. We train the athlete first.
Exactly.
That's the main thing that we want to get done. And then how that relates on the tennis court and what happens with their tennis, we'll see. We'll see.
Exactly.
We got time.
There's time.
Right.
All right, so now let's talk about something that I think not only all people, but coaches, entrepreneurs, men, women, whatever it is the why. I think knowing your why of who you and what you are, what's the reason you get up in the morning? Because at the time that the ungodly hour that we wake up, 99% of the people don't.
Right.
But there's got to be a why, right? What is it that moves you? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I can tell you that my why is for helping the athletes that I train. And I can give you a perfect example from this past weekend.
Okay.
So this past weekend, I had 2 professional athletes that had a good weekend. They had a good week.
Good.
And both of them were coming off of long-term, over a year out with injuries. Last weekend, Shelby Rogers won a tournament in Templeton, California. And she won it on my birthday, so thank you for that birthday present, Shelby.
Shout out to Shelby.
That.
We had her on the show. She was a guest on the show. So
and to see her come all the way back from knee surgery, be out a year, everything that she went through last fall, I spent probably 10 days a month out in out in Los Angeles, working with her and her coach, Mark, just getting her back. And it was very slow. And we took all the time that we needed. And this is what we were talking about earlier. We didn't have a schedule. We're just looking for improvement day to day. And, it's difficult. And the mindset of an athlete when they're not playing is very difficult. And props to Shelby. She learned a lot. I know she learned a lot about herself.
Absolutely.
And talk about finding her why.
She did. She talked all about it. She talked all about it on the show. And check out that episode.
Check out that episode. And for me to see her win that tournament, actually for me going all the way back to April and her first match back after over a year, and it was in her hometown of Charleston.
At a tournament.
And she won her first match, and the release of all the emotions from her. It was a beautiful thing. Being a very small part of that, that's my why. Also over the weekend, Cheech Gonzalez, baseball pitcher, had another good outing for the Rockies on Saturday. Went 6 innings, 1 run, no walks, 8 strikeouts. One of the things I look out for him is he had 8 ground outs and no fly balls. So I know he's on. And he capped off a September where he had an ERA of under 2 for the month. Got his first major league win since, I believe, 2015. He came back from Tommy John surgery. So he came in September of 2017, and he was about a month out of having the surgery. And we were preparing at that point for the 2019 season. We knew it was going to be a whole year. And again, for an athlete, a professional athlete, to be out that long,
it messes with your head.
It messes with your head, and you stay positive, and I try to keep them positive. But there's no guarantee. You can work as hard as you want. There's no guarantee. I knew deep down that both of those athletes, Shelby and Cheech, were going to make it back. I believed it, and to see them make it back, that's my why. That's what I get out of it.
That's awesome, man, and that's what moves us, right? So
right,
it's and staying on it, right? Because sometimes, dude, we have our own shit too.
Sure.
So as a coach, not only do we have we got to push when pushing is needed, but we also hear a lot of, hey, I'm going through this. I don't want to work out today. I'm just not feeling it. Or, dude, I have it with my personal clients. Moms are just like,
I have it. I go, oh man, I got to work out today. I'm not feeling it today.
Right. But we've got to grind through it.
We do it.
Right. And dude, it's the passion of helping. It's the passion of seeing that relief of the comeback.
Right.
Of any of our athletes, and we believe everybody's an athlete here.
Right.
So,
and we just want them to reach their potential. It doesn't matter if their potential is winning a professional tournament, making it to the major leagues, getting a college scholarship, whatever their potential is, we want to help them reach that. We want to help them max out.
Right. No, and I've seen it. I mean, I've seen your clients from starting high school, and then they're playing in college ball. They're in the college teams.
Right.
And then they come back, they're like, oh, I graduated. I was like, really? Dude, how time flies, right?
I know.
And I've seen
you were just that snot-nosed little kid, like yesterday, right?
Last year.
I think I did choke you last year. Wait, that was 6 years ago?
That was 6 years. Yeah. And then you have kids that are just like, you know what, I'm done. And you got to respect that too.
Absolutely.
Right? You're like, you know what, I'm done. I'm over it. Cool, man.
And you know what? I've had athletes where the tennis part of them kind of faded off, but they still wanted to work out.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine. And you know what? We just changed their program.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, so this is our goal now. So this is our plan now.
It's programming.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. But it's those relationships that you build. And I think that goes back a little bit to my why as well. The relationship that you build with that athlete, and they know that you care about them as a person first and foremost. What's the saying? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I also believe that there is a methodology of being a coach that if you don't have a good interpersonal relationship and you don't know how to convene knowledge to maybe layman's terms or normal terms, and then you explain something, because you could have all the knowledge in the world, and we've seen great trainers,
sure.
master's degrees, CSCSs, all these fancy
initials past their name all
12
over.
different styles, but they can't keep a client for over a month because they just don't have that
Right. So
interpersonal communication.
when I was in the corporate part, and we would have new trainers come in and interview, or interns come in, they would generally fit into one of those two categories. They've got all this knowledge in the world, but they can't find a way to get it to the client. And then you might have the ones who maybe they miss a couple of questions on the anatomy test. They're still working out on their programming, but they can relate to the client. I will take that any day, because that guy, I can teach him the anatomy. I can teach him the programming. I can teach him about periodization. I can't teach him a personality. I can't teach them how to talk to somebody.
Or how to sell.
Or how to listen as well.
Which is a huge part of our job.
And by the way, the ones in the other category, there are a lot of research jobs, that type of thing, where they do the research and write the articles that we read, and then go, hey, this is how I put that into my everyday use.
Absolutely. No. I mean, there's just different types,
it's
right?
Just different.
It all depends on the model you drive, right?
Right.
It all depends on that. And I think not only do we have, which brings me up to this other topic, which I want to bring up. So let's talk about how your business, right, is now a real degree. Right? Because when I was in college, they didn't have exercise science.
No.
Right? And now it's a full-blown degree.
Right.
Exercise science, and you could go into specific other stuff, because back in the day, it was maybe kinesiology.
And now you go, you take that and you go to physical therapy, or there's so many different things, athletic training.
Right. But the problem I see nowadays is that they'll come out of school with all these degrees, right? And they're expecting the $80,000 year job,
right,
or making $80 an hour for each session,
right?
Which you sat in this desk, and everybody sits in one of these desks, and you're interviewing. Like, what do you expect to make? Oh yeah, well, my professor said that I should ask for $80 an hour.
Professor said.
Professor.
Okay.
Sweet professor. So you're coming up on these generation coming in with good knowledge, but no business sense. And that's where I think you've always been successful, because you know numbers too. You understand numbers.
Well, yeah, because exercise science didn't exist back in our day. I majored in economics. So.
Right, and I'm a businessman.
Right,
too, right?
exactly.
Exactly. So again, it's some of these, maybe it's a flaw in today. Like, hey, man, exercise science is great, but where's the basics? Right?
Right.
You can't multiply or do something. Like, you can't come out expecting an $80,000 job when you're going to come in and sell. You got to come in and talk to people. It's part of it.
It's a huge part of it.
Right? And you can have, it's frustrating.
Right.
It is.
Right.
Right? Because it's a letdown. You can't tell these new generation that you're going to be making this amount. It's not banking. Right? It's not software design. It's not that you will apply, this is the job, this is your salary.
You eat what you kill.
It's the tribe mentality over here, right? So you bring it to the table, you're going to make some money.
Right. Just like in any other thing.
Any sales job.
Any sales job, even an attorney, how many billable hours can you produce?
Right.
That's a big deal.
What are you bringing to the table?
Right. What are you bringing to the table? And that's something that isn't taught in school, And again, for the people who don't necessarily grasp that, there are plenty of other areas within our field that they can go. Mm-hmm. Look, if you don't want to worry about going out and getting clients, go the collegiate route. because they got plenty of athletes waiting for you. They're going to come see you.
All day.
Every day.
The grind is
for
rough.
a long time.
Yeah, and you're going to grind.
And you are. And when you start, you're going to get the crappy teams, and it's just the way it is.
Crappy hours in the gym.
Exactly.
And that's it. But again, that's how you climb up. But absolutely right. If that's the science you want to go after, if that's the particular, if you don't want to sell, that's it. That's the drive you need to be. But if you want to be your own thing, if you want to do the old, you got to understand every single side of it, right? Right. And I think that's not really talked about a lot in school, which kind of disappoints me a little bit.
Right. And it's the same thing. It's still cultivating relationships. And you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to do that with your clients. You have to be able to do that from a business standpoint. And again, just having that knowledge is only part of it.
30%.
30%.
Max.
Yeah.
Right,
easily.
So talk to me about what does raw tennis look like in the next year or two, man? With all these big names coming on board, I know you're super busy. Funneling some clients my way too. So that's great. We love it. But let's talk about, man, because it's...
Well, one of the things too that
you're teaching as well. You're consulting. Sorry, you're consulting,
and that's one of the things that I had wanted to branch out into, and I was fortunate enough last year to be able to do that. So I started working with the Rice University women's team in Houston, and they were. I went in. I spent time with them. I think 3 weeks last fall, and then also helping them out in the spring. And they won their conference title, and I'm still waiting on my conference championship ring. So I think on my next trip to Houston, I will get that. But so that's something that I'm really proud of in the relationship that I've developed with them. But this goes back a little bit too to what you and I were talking about. It's building those relationships. So the coach there, Elizabeth Schmidt, is someone who played at UCLA. And while she was at UCLA, I started working with her a little bit. She turned pro. This was 20 some odd years ago. She turned pro. I worked with her. I coached her some while she was on the tour. Then she got into college coaching. And, she circled back and reached out to me last summer and said, hey, are you interested in doing this? And the timing was perfect, because it was a time where I was going to have the availability. I was going to have the time that I could put into it like I wanted to do it properly. And it was something that I had been thinking about. It was another avenue that I wanted to move into. And she was there. But again, that's a relationship I've had since 1997, 1998. And that's another thing, too, that I think that some of the younger people need to understand, is that sometimes these things take time to come to fruition. Maybe not necessarily 20 years, but I'll tell you another example. Was years ago when I had the time, when I was first starting out, I was very dedicated to getting out a newsletter. I had an email newsletter that I was getting out probably once a month. And it was just a really quick thing. I would have a tip. I would, if my players had done well at a tournament, if I had done a speaking engagement, things like that. Just something quick, and every month. So I had a player come in for an evaluation, and he was 14, I think. And I was talking to his mom, and I said, how did you find out about me? Because kind of important, what's working.
Know what's
because
working.
What is it? 20% of my marketing works, but I don't know which 80% to cut.
Correct.
That helps. So she goes, oh, his coach said that he needed to get faster and stronger. And as soon as he said that, I knew right where to go. I've been getting your email newsletter for 2 years.
There you go.
So you got to touch. And it takes a while, but you just have to be. You have to be consistent. That's the thing. And so, we build these relationships over time, and then you're there when they need it.
Yeah, I mean, I say I'm like a farmer. You plant seeds everywhere. Some come to fruition. Sometimes you don't even know what you planted, but next thing you know, you have a big old tree.
Right.
Or sometimes, it just fell apart. But you just got to keep working at it, keep plugging away.
Exactly.
And then everything happens for a reason. Again, and we're intertwined in some way. You always can't be burning bridges, right?
Right.
And if you do burn a bridge, make sure that's the bridge you want to burn, right? 'Cause it could come bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, but again, you want to do the right things.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that was fun. Where can our audience find you, Richard, socially?
Social media. My Twitter account and my Instagram are Raw Tennis Perform. RAW10S Perform.
Awesome.
That's the best place. You can check out my website at rawtennisperformance.com and reach out to me through my email there.
There you go. Still doing emails. I love it. Dude, thanks a lot for coming, man.
Yeah,
I really
man. Thanks for
appreciate you
having
coming
me.
on.
I appreciate it.
Love you, buddy.
All right, man.